The first thing I want to begin with is that we oftentimes underestimate the power of dua. And in the Prophet's lives and in the course of our history, there have been some very powerful du'as that have been made that have literally altered the course of history. And so if we look at Adam alayhi salam's du'a, where he sought forgiveness from Allah after he sinned, and this is the first ever recorded dua that a human ever made. And he said, رَبَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا وَإِن لَمْ تَغْفِرْ لَنَا وَتَرْحَمْنَا لَنَكُونَنَّ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. Our Lord, we have wronged ourselves, and if you don't forgive us, and if you don't have mercy on us, we shall certainly be of the losers. And the thing that set Adam apart from Shaitan was the fact that he repented. And so Shaitan, we know he will be punished, but Adam, he was saved because of this dua. And so it quite literally, it changed his qadr, but it also changed the qadr of his progeny, because now we get a shot to win back Jannah in a sense, and we get another chance of going back to our home. And if he hadn't repented, if he hadn't been forgiven, we don't know what could have happened. Maybe there would be no mankind. Maybe we'd be replaced by a completely different creation. And so this is a reminder of how powerful dua can be. And in fact, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that dua is the only thing that can change qadr. So literally, change your destiny. And so we really need to just remind ourselves of how powerful dua actually is. And another example is Prophet Ibrahim's dua when he prayed to God to send them, meaning the Arabs, send them a messenger from amongst themselves who will recite your verses onto them. And Allah answered his prayer, and he sent us Prophet Muhammad, and he sent us the Quran. So when we are in the month of Ramadan now, celebrating the Quran being revealed, like the first few verses being revealed, it's important to remember that, hey, actually this was because the Prophet Ibrahim asked this dua for his generation. So he not only changed his own decree, but his progeny as well. So another really great example, and we will actually have a whole lecture on Prophet Yunus alayhi salam's dua. But this is kind of an intro. The fact that when he was swallowed up by the whale, he called out to God, and that's why he was saved. So he said, La ilaha illa ant, there is no God for you except you. Subhanak, inni kuntu min al-zalimin. Glory be to you, verily I've been amongst the wrongdoers. And we notice again here, he used the word zalimin to refer to himself and to admit to his mistake. And in the previous slide, we saw that Adam alayhi salam also said, zalamna anfusana. So it's about admitting your mistake to God when you're calling out to him. That helps you to be saved. And the fact that Yunus alayhi salam didn't even ask to be saved. He just glorified Allah, and because of that, he was saved. So that's what dua is. It's not, it's not when you ask something specifically, because that's talab, that's not dua. Dua literally just means calling out to God in whatever form. And God says in a different place in the Quran, لولا أن كان من المسبحين للبث في بطنه إلى يوم يبعثون. Had he not been of the ones who glorified God, he would have been in the belly of the whale forever. So it was literally just the fact that he glorified Allah. And this dua actually is really good for these current times when we ourselves feel like we're trapped, quite literally in our homes, and it's dark times. And so the more we increase this dua, inshallah, the sooner God will save us from this. And the Prophet also said about this dua that if it's a great thing to overcome distress or grief, this dua will bring you joy if you recite it. So a good reminder about that. The other important thing to remember about dua is that when you make dua, we need to be certain that Allah hears us by virtue of the fact that he is as-Samir, so he is all hearing. So every time you call to him, he hears you. But the other thing is that every time you call on to him, he actually responds. So the response is also guaranteed, because if you look at this verse, he says, "Ud'uni astajib lakum," call on me, I will respond to you. He doesn't say, call on me, I will hear you. He actually says, call on me, I will respond. You know, "Ud'uni astajib lakum." It's like a cause effect thing. Call me, I will respond. And also the other verse, which we come across quite a lot, this one, which is right after the verse of Ramadan as well. وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِي إِذَا دَعَانِ. I respond to the supplicant when he calls on me. So again, he doesn't just say, I hear, he says, I respond. So know that every time you call on God, you are getting a response. And it might not be in, you know, the exact way that you think God will respond, but he does respond. And we've all heard of the various responses you can get to your dua. You know, sometimes God accepts it exactly and gives you exactly what you're asking for. Sometimes he delays something because he has a bigger plan for you, and he will send you what you're asking for at just the right time. Other times his response will be saving you from a calamity or a distress, or he stores it for you and you get something in return for it in Jannah. So just because you feel like what you're asking for isn't being granted to you, or it's being delayed, it doesn't mean he's not hearing, it doesn't mean he's not responding, because the responses can come in a lot of different forms. And if we think about, for example, Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam, he prayed for his son for so many years, but there was a delay, right? Because God had a bigger plan. Yusuf had to be thrown in the well, he had to be taken to Egypt, he had to go through prison, he had to go through all these things to reach his final thing, which was that he ended up saving a whole country from a famine, and he became essentially what is, you know, what we would call the finance minister of the country. And so this delaying of Prophet Yaqub's dua didn't mean that God was not listening to him. It was just that he had a bigger plan. And sometimes our little human brains cannot comprehend even a pixel of the grand scheme of things. The other lesson we can learn from Prophet Yaqub's dua and the fact that this was delayed was that when you feel like God is not giving you what you're asking for, it doesn't mean that he's angry at you, because, you know, was he angry at Yaqub? Is that why he didn't respond? Like he didn't give him exactly what he wanted at that point? No, right? It was just, again, bigger plan, bigger scheme. So trust is another thing that goes hand in hand with dua. When you make dua, just trust that that God is responding to you, and he will give you more than what you expect. So I'm also reminded of Abu Bakr's story, because he was the person who really wanted to join the Prophet when the Prophet emigrated to Medina, and so he would be making dua for it and all that, and he actually behaved as if his dua had already been accepted. So he bought 2 camels, he was feeding them for like 4 months and all that. So eventually when the Prophet said, you are going to accompany me to Medina, can you get ready 2 camels? He was like, oh, I've already got them, you know. So that's another thing. That's how much he trusted that his dua will be accepted, that he actually prepared for it way before. So that's something we can try and incorporate in our lives. Next time we make dua, start acting like it's already been accepted, and start taking the actions that you would once it was accepted. The other thing is that when you do make dua, know that you're always getting something in return. So every time you're asking God, he will give you something in return, because we have this hadith where the Prophet says that your Lord is Al-Karim and Al-Hayy. He is generous and he is shy. And if his servant raises his hands to him, he is shy to return them empty. And obviously you don't have to raise your hands when you're making dua. It's not a necessary condition, but it's kind of a metaphor of every time you ask God, you do get something back. You do get a blessing or something that you don't notice, but just because you called to him, he heard you, he responded to you, and he gave you something in return. So actually, we're going to put this into practice right now. We'll pause for 10 seconds. You will make a dua, just anything. Just call on to him, and with the certainty that he's hearing you, he's going to respond, and you're going to get something in return. So let's do that for 10 seconds. Okay. So right now you are richer than you were 10 seconds ago, and you have more than you did 10 seconds ago by the fact that you just called on to God. So you got something in return. Okay. So before Ramadan started, this was something that I was trying to think about as to how do you judge whether you are close to Allah, and whether you are closer or less close, how do you measure it? And subhanallah, while I was preparing for this talk, I came across a lecture where the sheikh was saying that in the Quran, every time God refers to himself as qareeb, close, it is actually linked with dua or response or something like this. So again, the verse that I mentioned, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, verily I am close, أُجِيبُ دَعْوَةَ الدَّاعِ, I respond to the invocation. So again, the closeness has been linked to dua. In another place in the Quran, God says, Inna Rabbi qareebun mujib, I am near and I'm responsive, and he's near because he's responsive. And when does he respond? It's when you call on to him, right? So the closeness, again, is linked to us calling to him. So dua is not only a tool that helps you become closer to Allah, but the closer you are, the more you call on to him. And it makes sense as well, right? In our own friendships and relationships, the closer you are to a person, the better your communication with this person, right? They just get you, your conversations are more meaningful and richer. And so, that's how you can judge your closeness to God as well. So again, coming back to the idea of how powerful dua is, and the fact that when you communicate with God more, you become, from his awliya, the friends of Allah, and how having this sort of mindset that God is with you wherever you are, he is your wali, as in your protecting friend, it can completely change your whole outlook on life and make you less likely to become fearful or hopeless or worried, because God says, Ala inna awliya Allahi la khawfun alayhim wa la hum yahzanun, surely on the friends of Allah there will be no fear, nor shall they grieve. And so if you do become a friend of Allah, then there's no need for fear, because if you think about, if you're in a storm, God is the captain of the ship, the winds are in his control, the waves underneath you are also in his control. So you literally, you have nothing to fear about and worry about and be hopeless about. And these days, when we get stressed, we're expecting too much of ourselves, and we're expecting too little of God, and we're feeling alone, and we think that we have to do this alone, but you don't have to do this alone, because he's with you. وَهُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ, he's with you wherever you are. So you're not doing something alone. So just make dua, ask for his help, and there will be nothing to worry about, inshallah. And this verse as well, I really love. So it's like, فَاللَّهُ هُوَ الْوَلِي, God is the protecting friend, وَهُوَ يُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى, and he gives life to the dead, وَهُوَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ, and he's able to do all things. And normally when I would read this verse, you would take these three things as, three independent facts. But it took me a really long time to actually see the link between all of these, because it's like God is saying that this being that actually gives life to the dead and who is able to do all things, he is your protecting friend, right? It's not just any friend, it's a friend who has the power to give life to the dead. So that's how powerful this friend is, and that's that's your wali, that's who protects you. So yeah, again, this goes well with what's happening outside right now, and us being all fearful about the pandemic and stuff. But you know, this dua that the Prophet taught us, Bismillah alladhi la yadurru ma'a ismihi shay'un fil ardi wala fis sama'i wa huwa as-sami'ul 'alim. In with the name of God, nothing can harm me, whether it's in the heavens or the earth, and verily God is all hearing, all knowing. So just remember these things, and just try and incorporate that into your daily lives, and try to use dua and this connection with God as something that helps you get rid of your worries, inshallah. So one of the really beautiful things about dua, and why it is such the essence of worship, like the Prophet said, that it's the essence of our ibadah and the backbone of our ibadah, is because when you're making dua, you're actually affirming the attributes and the perfect nature of Allah, because you would only call on to someone if you knew that he could hear you. So you're affirming that he's al-Samir, you're confirming that he's al-Mujib, that he responds. When you're asking for forgiveness, you're affirming that he is al-Ghafar and al-Wadud, the most loving. When you ask him to give you, you are confirming that he's al-Wahhab, someone who bestows upon you. When you ask him, so here the dua of Musa, where he says, Rabbi inni lima anzalta ilayya min khairin faqir, my Lord, I am in dire need of whatever good you send me. So he didn't ask for specific things like, oh, give me a job, give me that. He just said, anything good that you send me, I am in dire need of. And it's implying that God knows better what he needs, and this affirms that God is al-Khabir, he knows you. Al-Latif, which is such a beautiful name. It means the gentle one, and the one who's most aware of like the subtleties, like very small details about you and small things that you need in your life. God is aware of all that. God knows exactly what you need for your well-being. He's al-Latif. So another thing we can do is use these names of God when we're calling on to him. So try to incorporate that into our daily lives, inshallah. And finally, I would just like to mention that when your dua is accepted, you really should acknowledge that it is from God, that you got this blessing. Again, we have the example of the Prophet Ibrahim when he said, Alhamdulillah alladhi wahaba ala al-kibar Ismail wa Ishaq, praise be to God who granted me in my old age, my two sons. And so he acknowledged that it's from Allah before he went on to make more du'as. And then Sulaiman alayhi salam, he said, when the jinn was able to get the throne of the queen to his palace, the Prophet then acknowledged that the fact that he has the ability to get something like this done for him is truly a blessing from Allah. هذا من فضل ربي, this is because of the grace of my Lord. ليبلوني أأشكر أم أكفر, and he realized that this blessing was actually to test whether he is grateful or ungrateful. So it reminds us that our blessings can actually be tested, because they test whether you are ungrateful or grateful. And then he says, وَمَنْ شَكَرَ فَإِنَّمَا يَشْكُرُ لِنَفْسِهِ وَمَنْ كَفَرَ فَإِنَّ رَبِّي غَنِيٌّ كَرِيمٌ. So whoever is grateful, it's really for his own self. It's not that God needs our thanks, but it's that we are indebted to him, and so we need to thank him. It's not him who needs the thanks, because he is Ghani and Kareem. He will still continue to give. He will still be rich and bountiful. And obviously other places in the Quran where it says لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ, if you are grateful, we will increase you. And also places in the Quran where God just says, وَقَلِيلٌ مِّنْ عِبَادِيَ الشَّكُورُ, so few of my servants are actually grateful. And it's quite like, it shows sort of disappointment, like so few of my slaves are grateful. Like what is wrong with them? Why are so few of them grateful? And if you think about everything we have, like if we, again, the verse, وَإِن تَعُدُّوا نِعْمَةَ اللَّهِ لَا تُحْصُوهَا, if you were to count the blessings of your Lord, you wouldn't even be able to count, a single one. And that is true. I mean, if we try and thank him for our vision, just our vision, and everything you've been able to see, everything you've been able to do your whole life because of your vision, you can't even we can't even thank him for our vision. Even taste, all the wonderful things we've tasted our whole life, we can't even begin to thank him. And there's obviously Qarun's example, who was ungrateful, and because of that he was punished. And he said, when he was given all these riches and these blessings, he said, oh, innama utituhu ala ilmin indi, this has been given to me because I'm so clever and because of the knowledge that I have. And he didn't recognize, again, that it was a blessing from God, and because of that he was punished. So that these are just some reminders, and I hope you benefited from this, and I hope that we can incorporate these into our lives and become more thankful and become closer to God and become of those who call on him and he listens to. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. And the last of what we say is Alhamdulillah, our praises, all praises and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. Thank you.